Pro Football Network recently put out a coaches poll ranking the 32 NFL head coaches. We'll talk about where Kevin Stefanski comes up on that list. Second segment, we'll get to a little bit about Coach Stefanski's present and maybe past. And third segment, we'll get to the future, which will be decided most likely here in 2023. All this and more. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, Sports Illustrated's Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends. The show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Hello, everybody. Appreciate everybody makes Locked On Browns their first listen. The everydayers, and as Locked On Browns now reached over 6,000 subscribers here on YouTube. I suggest you join the legions of everydayers by making sure you subscribe to the Locked On Browns podcast here on YouTube. Notifications on audio-wise, Locked On Browns. Always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, at Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. Been here now 7 seasons of Cleveland Browns coverage. It's been quite the ride. There's no question about it. Bunch of ups and downs, in-betweens, and just tough overall spots. But here to tell the tale as we continue here on another week here of Locked On Browns. Joined today, Browns Digest Sports Illustrated, Pete Smith in. I don't know if you guys caught it. The Pro Football Network the other day put out, and I guess they polled the staff and ranked the top 32 NFL head coaches. The rookie head coaches basically just fell to the back of the line. This is a list that could certainly be, you could have your fun with it. I think there's a lot of recency bias to it. I don't think this is overall head coaching rankings. I think this is probably where head coaching rankings are right now as we go from 22 to 23. On that list, Coach Stefanski comes in at 20th overall. Some coaches behind him that I definitely think he's better than. Some coaches in front of him that I probably think he's better than. But it's certainly been a little bit of a rocky road for Coach Stefanski as he goes into year 4 here with the Cleveland Browns. The list obviously was Andy Reid was top of the list. Go to the 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls, win 2 of them, kind of understandably so there. But Pete, and look, this is June. This is the content we get. Not a lot of X's and O's to talk about right now. Not a lot of statistical performances to talk about right now. So, we take the work and, we all know what the drill is this time of year. So you get a list like this, Pete, and, Coach Stefanski, I think for you and I both, I think we hold him in a little bit higher regard. But at the end of the day, you haven't gone to the playoffs in 2 straight years. Your record is what it is, and that's basically the biggest reflection upon you. Pete, Coach Stefanski, 20th overall in Pro Football Network's coaching ranks.
Well, unlike team power rankings, which are based on something, this is completely arbitrary, and you probably not going to argue too much with the top 5, 6 or so. Even then, maybe I'd start arguing at 6. But you sort of have a sense of where the neighborhoods guys should be in at the top. You feel relatively confident. But after that, it's just completely how you feel at a given time. So, who do I think should be Kevin Stefanski be ahead of? Mike McCarthy, who's at 17. Dan Campbell, who's at 19. Mike McDaniel at 14. I mean, and Brian Daboll, I understand why he's on there. He literally just had Kevin Stefanski's first season, and most people expect him to also have Kevin Stefanski's second season. So, it's sort of a snapshot. Is Sean Payton, based off his resume, you'd say, yes, he certainly belongs to be there, but he's been out a couple of years. Is he going to suddenly bounce back? And, Ron Rivera's 25th. He's better than 25th. But at the same time, I think Josh McDaniels is rated too high at 26th. If there was a 40, he should be there. And then, most of these guys it's okay, but I think largely Kevin Stefanski is a product of, I don't think about this guy terribly often, and I just got to put him somewhere. But behind Dan Campbell, no.
And look, the way this stuff works, you're looking at this, and of course, 2 straight years missed with the playoffs, and we're going to get to this in segment 2, because obviously, there were some things that, led to 2021. There's some things that led to 2022. Certainly, some of those things, if not most of them, were out of Kevin Stefanski's control, so to speak. But the way, and you look at it, and, and we kind of understand, and we'll get to this obviously in segment 3, is, you're starting to get to the crossroads here with Coach Stefanski, which is why 2023 is going to be such a defining season for him. But Pete, largely when you look at the first 3 years here, it's not been so much, it's not been like disarray. It's not been some of the things that we dealt with, certainly with Hugh Jackson. It's not been a question about whether or not the man is capable of leading. It's not a question of whether or not the man is capable of the job, which is certainly something we have gone through here in the past covering this franchise. I just think, and this has probably been the most difficult part for him, is just the way you came in so strong in 2020, which was such difficult circumstances. Obviously in the height of COVID, the way training camp worked, no preseason, and then to put together a season like they did, finally make the playoffs, win a playoff game, and to not go to the playoffs the last 2 years, that kind of, explains pretty simply how, you basically, I don't want to say on the outside looking in, but, further down the list than obviously I'm sure he would like to be.
Sure. Look, the situation has been what it is, but I think the overall things you take away with Kevin Stefanski are pretty simple. His offense is good. Quarterbacks are better with him than they are anywhere else. And those 2 things alone make you a good head coach in this league. Quarterback is everything. If you can't make that work, you're not going to stay employed. He does that well. He's able to lead his team to points consistently. The rest you can either learn or find, hire people who can deal with the other things. But he checks the boxes for the things that you have to have as a head coach.
And to his credit, and this is kind of what we're going to get to here in segment 2, a lot of things just, went off the rails, certainly 2021, 2022, the way it started out after the acquisition of Deshaun Watson, and then finally getting the finality of, what the decision was on how much time Deshaun Watson was actually going to be able to play in 2022, then trying to navigate that road with a journeyman backup quarterback. And, no disrespect to Jacoby Brissett, obviously, certainly played capable, and then having it, not the offensive side of the ball turn out to be such a huge problem here. We're going to switch it up here. Appreciate everybody, obviously, always along for the ride here, the Everydayers. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Browns on YouTube, notifications on. Locked On Browns, always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Little something here from the good folks over at FanDuel. Major League Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place we get on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. If you guys are like me and you love your favorite team and you're going to commit 2 to 3 hours watching them, I got a great suggestion for you. Put together a same-game parlay. Get better on your starting pitcher, your top hitter, maybe an underdog in the lineup you think is going to have a big day. Small amount of money to put down, but a chance at a big payout. So miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission.
You are Locked On Browns, Your daily Cleveland. You are.
Continuing here on your latest Locked On Browns, Jeff Lloyd, joined by Sports Illustrated Pete Smith, to discuss, obviously, the head coaching rank from the Pro Football Network. Coach Kevin Stefanski coming in 20th overall. Certainly, you would think these rankings based more on the last two seasons, and of course, 2021. You started off with the road loss of the Kansas City Chiefs, win a couple games at home, but in that time, Baker Mayfield obviously suffers a major injury that he tries to deal with for the rest of the season. Costs him a lot of time, costs him being the successful player out there. In turn, 2021 just turned into an absolute mess of a season. 2022, you make this acquisition of Deshaun Watson. You think you finally have yourself your franchise quarterback, somebody that can play on the level of a Josh Allen, play on the level of a Patrick Mahomes. Then you get the finality of the suspension. It turns out to be 11 games. You understand it's a very limited time before Deshaun Watson gets back. To his credit, Jacoby Brissett played admirably in that time. You had a team that was thinking you were going to rely heavy on your defense, led by Joe Woods, a unit that had finished so strong in 2021, which was probably one of the underlinings, one of the least talked about stories of the 2021 season. I think everybody expected there to be carryover into 2022. Of course, that did not happen, which leads to, of course, where you are in 2023 now. Obviously, the pressure is on. A lot of moves have been made. But Pete, for Coach Stefanski, with the success coming out the gate in 2020, it raised the bar, and nobody's running away from that. Obviously, he's not a fool to it. Once this team finally reached the playoffs, was able to win a playoff game, it became in this fan base's eyes, and certainly in reporters and content makers' eyes, that this is what this team was capable of. But you had 2 years back to back that just did not work out. And you end up in a situation here where, maybe he's not viewed that highly, around the league. And certainly the pressure is on Coach Stefanski at this point.
Sure. I mean, nature of the beast, there's pressure for him to deliver. I would still maintain that if the Browns are stupid enough to fire him, he will get hired by somebody else and be very good because of what he does well, because he's able to maximize the quarterback position, because he's able to run an effective offense. The Browns scored well over 400 points in 2020, which is past the threshold of 25 points per game, which is a lock to make the playoffs historically. So this year with 17 games, 425 is the goal. I have no reason to think they won't make that. But Baker Mayfield played the best football of his career in Cleveland. Jacoby Brissett played the best football of his career in Cleveland. And even though there's somebody who's going to go, well, he was just as good as Indianapolis, that's fine, but he was at his peak in Cleveland too. So, I mean, either way, he was great. Now it's Deshaun Watson. Even though you can point to those 6 games and say, that was really bad, there's every reason to believe that Deshaun Watson's going to be at least better. And it's just a question of how much better. And again, given that you have Kevin Stefanski running the offense and everything else they've assembled, there's every reason to believe that he's going to be play at a high level, which is going to make this offense very good and put them in a position to make the postseason. Injuries have been a problem, obviously, some on the line, some other things, but that's nature of the beast. And then he's done a nice job with coordinators. Look, whatever you want to say about Joe Woods and some of the other guys that have been here, they went out and got good coordinators. Nobody's going to sit here and say that Jim Schwartz can't coach, and they got a coup in their special teams coordinator, which nobody thought was going to happen. So they've been able to get guys that should make this team better. So it's all there for it. And now they've just got to deliver. I have no reason to believe they won't. And if they do, hopefully they can do what the Bills just did and extend the pair of Andrew Berea and Kevin Stefanski and keep this thing rolling, because they do have this thing headed in a good direction.
Well, and that's where, it kind of becomes difficult here. And, and certainly not a knock in any way for, Browns fans, having a taste of it. And, all of a sudden, this wanting to be the outcome of every season, there's nothing wrong with that. But, the reality is there were times where we've seen sparks from this franchise or limited doses from this franchise that kind of got everybody with the warm and fuzzies, so to speak, only to have it come crashing and burning down, whether it's a 1-15 season, 0-16 season, a 2-14 season. And this team has continued to be able to, hover. Is that good enough? No. In the long run, it's most certainly not good enough. But it's not like this franchise has gone all the way back, Pete, to, the bare bones of, rebuilding, break out the shovels. We got to start all the way from scratch, digging up the dirt. Certainly some unfortunate incidents. The Deshaun Watson thing, everybody wanted it to happen. They made it happen. When the suspension came, it was what it was. 2021, Baker, the injury, then it affecting his play, then causing the dissension within the ranks, and still that team was kind of in it almost till the end. It's a different type of misery. It's a different type of bad, of course. But this team has certainly been in situations where maybe if you were even, fooled for a tiny bit to think things were getting better, you basically just got the absolute, sledgehammer put over your head and basically just reaffirmed, no, it's not getting better. This franchise is still sorry. And I don't think that is, the feeling of anybody who looks at this franchise nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, look, once Baker Mayfield's shoulder went, it was over. That season was over. It didn't matter. The degree to which it was over was more or less irrelevant. In the same way that the Browns season was effectively over the second it was an 11-game suspension for Deshaun Watson. Yes, you can sit there and go, well, they could have been 9-7. And then we could hang the third place banner up in Cleveland Browns Stadium because everybody's super pumped about those. And yeah, look, don't get me wrong. It would have been nice to finish out on a winning record. It would have been nice to sort of show that improvement. But fourth place in the way the NFL is formatted is irrelevant, especially because of how much we see teams go from last to first or whatever. And the fact that the Browns finished fourth last year doesn't matter because they are now in a position to contend for first this year. It's not a situation where you feel like you have to like build your way up and like go third and then go second. It's irrelevant in the NFL, especially the way the Browns have built their roster. They were fourth last year. They can easily win the division this year. And by easily, I don't mean it will be an easy task. It's just the nature of the beast is the Browns could go 11-6 and win an AFC North title. So I don't worry about that stuff. You either make the playoffs or you don't. That's the NFL. And if you're not in the tournament, then it doesn't matter. But it's also the reason why you don't overreact when you go, well, they didn't make the playoffs. Well, you didn't have you had an injured quarterback for 1 year. You're not going to the playoffs. You had a displaced quarterback who was out with suspension for another year. Then we got spoiled early with, again, because Kevin Stefanski did his job effectively.
No doubt.
There was a belief that they could make this thing work, only to get the harsh reality that everybody sort of knew was coming, that they weren't going to be good enough. And now you're in a position where everything's there. They've not only, have the quarterback they want, but now they've been able to build the roster they want. And now it's time to make it happen.
There's no question in those regards. Obviously the pressure is here, and we're going to focus a little bit as we get to segment 3. If you were an NFL coach that's missed 2 straight postseasons and you're going into a third season after that, everybody kind of knows what the writing is. The writing is on the wall. It's not. It's no surprise. That basically you are in a most likely a save yourself approach here if this does not go well here in 2023. But we're going to focus on 2023. We're going to focus on certainly the future of Coach Stefanski here with the Cleveland Browns as we transition over to segment 3. Pete Smith, Sports Illustrated Browns Digest. Always appreciate Pete's time for being along. Appreciate all of you for being along for the ride, just like the Everydayers. And the easiest way to join the Everydayers in full, subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Notifications on, Locked On Browns. Always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Pete, as we continue to talk here on Coach Stefanski, now here, year 4, originally a 5-year deal. Now, with Coach in the spot he is in here, certainly there's no doubt. Look, the pressure is on to go a third season, to, finish in that middling mark, a game or two under 500 for a third season, for it to not be a playoff season. It certainly is going to rise up questions of whether he's brought back for a 5th year. And, those questions, in my opinion, they're legitimate. Do I think it's going to happen? I think it would have to be extremely ugly for Coach Kevin Stefanski to not get his 5th year here. But, Pete, there's also this part here in year 4 of 5 where if there is a playoff opportunity in 2023, then you're talking about a coach who went to the playoffs 2 out of 4 years, dealt with circumstances in 2021 out of his control, dealt with some circumstances in 2022 that were kind of out of his control. All of a sudden, it's not about year 5, it's about years 5, 6, and possibly 7. Look, if this franchise can get a head coach to take them to the playoffs twice in 4 years, it's more of the time, it's more probably of the talk of, hey, how long are you and your family willing to commit to this area of the United States? Because it becomes essentially uncharted waters for the Cleveland Browns franchise.
Yeah, I mean, look, 4 years is the longest any coach has been here since God only knows. So it's a big deal to do that, but now it's got to, certainly something could happen injury-wise where Deshaun Watson, gets hurt or whatever. But it's different in that, you're not going into this season with an understanding that, your expectations are already lowered because there's a massive suspension or, injury to this point. So it's all there for you. You could make the reasonable argument that, people who wanted the Browns to fire Kevin Stefanski the last 2 years were insane based on unrealistic expectations. That is no longer the case. There are legitimate, realistic expectations. Obviously, the playoffs are a big deal. Given just how competitive the AFC is, I could see a scenario where he makes it if they go 9-7 and fall short, or 9-8, 10-7, and miss the playoffs and stick around another year. I think a losing season is where they get in trouble. But my expectation is that they're going to have a winning record. They're going to make the postseason, and they're going to make this easy on the front on the organization to be keep it rolling.
Yeah, I mean, that is for me the biggest thing because and you look at it, and even before when we were talking about coordinators, and obviously we're mentioning that point, you talk about a guy like Bill Callahan who's been here throughout this time, and certainly a guy like Bill Callahan. There's always opportunities to do something else with this league. But obviously, here is a guy who feels comfortable working with Coach Stefanski, being a part of his staff, obviously a big name in this NFL business. A guy like Jim Schwartz coming here to work for Kevin Stefanski, a big name as well in this business. And, it comes down to obviously respect. Number one, I'm sure it's respect how he handles himself, how he conducts himself, the fact that he is loyal to his staff. But, to be able to, with 2 straight losing seasons, to get a draw, like a guy like Jim Schwartz to come in here and coach your defense, which, for Coach Stefanski, he's got his thing on the offensive side of the ball and kind of wants to maybe, I don't want to say rest on his laurels, but be able to give that side over. And even now with Jim Schwartz, you're getting a bigger name in here, a more established, a more credible gentleman in this league than Joe Woods was. And look, for Joe Woods, it didn't end well, but there were times where it were good. And Joe Woods certainly came in here with a solid reputation. Of course, we all know basically how it ended for this team. But with the belief that this defense should be exponentially better than last year, with the belief that Deshaun Watson now comfortable, whether within himself, his off-field stuff, within the city, within the team, within the teammates, within the system. Still having star players like Nick Chubb, still having star players like Myles Garrett, still having star players like Denzel Ward here. This is one, like, we all kind of know where this could go wrong and, what that could lead to. But the overall belief has to be, and if you study this franchise for the last 3 seasons leading up to this one, if you studied for a year or two before, or even if you're 2018 where you saw some glimpses of success, there's no reason to think that this doesn't work other than, your favorite line, the banana peel, any one of these things. But you look at what this product is, and you look, we all know when we've talked defensive tackle, we've talked backup running back, and, until those aren't addressed, we still believe in somehow, some way they will be. But it's just too hard to look at this overall and seeing what we've seen, whether it's Andrew Berry, certainly whether it's Kevin Stefanski, and all these other things that I just brought to light here, Pete, that this should not succeed.
Yeah, look, I mean, just based on his track record, it says they're going to be good. Now, there are things that they have to sort out. They have to close out games in a way they didn't last year. You would like to think that, one, the investments they've made on defense, particularly the defensive line and Jim Schwartz, should make a big difference in that. Because they closed games really well in 2020, by contrast. And then they've just got to be effective so that we don't have what I would argue are nonsensical, but nevertheless distractions in terms of, worrying about how emotive Kevin Stefanski is on the sideline and all these other things. Because we don't hear about any of that stuff as long as they win. If they win games, nobody's going to care. If they win games, Kevin Stefanski is going to be a good leader. If they lose games, he's not a good leader. That's sort of how this thing works, especially with the way he is, because he's authentic in how he approaches it. And that really comes down to taste. Personally, I don't care. Like, his players know what to expect. I think that there's a value in that, as opposed to being like, random lunatic or trying to, play a role in a movie that doesn't exist. Just be who you are. If the players respond to that, and I think the Browns players do, then those things will take care of themselves. The areas that Kevin Stefanski can improve in, that are going to make meaningful changes this year, I think by virtue of him entering his 4th year, he's not learning the job anymore. He can just focus on doing those things, which I think is important, and a big reason to why you want to continue with continuity, because you don't want to have to then hire another guy who now has to learn the job or is trying to adjust to the job or whatever it is. Just let him do it. And now it's his opportunity to take that next step and be a better coach with the better team that you expect to be good.
Yeah, and then it would be the question of, what are you ripping down as well? Does Bill Callahan stay? Does Jim Schwartz stay? And, look, we can say all of these things, but you go 3-14, that tail is going to write itself. But I think Pete and I are both coming from the spot where we're just a lot more confident that we feel this product, it's going to play. It should succeed, and barring, and certainly we've seen it. And again, barring the old, banana peel, I just don't see how this is not a succeeding product here in 2023. He is Pete Smith, Browns Digest, SportsIllustrated.com. Pete and his team do a fantastic job. Daily content every single day, week in, week out, month in, month out, season in, season out. One of my first reads every day, so I suggest it become one of yours. So make sure you're checking out Browns Digest at SportsIllustrated.com. Make sure you're following @_Pete Smith_. Myself, your host, Jeff Lloyd, @Jeff_LJ_Lloyd. As I said, 7th season now going into Cleveland Browns coverage. Certainly been a wild, wild ride. Nowhere else I'd certainly rather be to this point, though. Loving every minute of it. To the everydayers who are the fabric on which the Locked On Browns podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network is built, you guys are the absolute best. Anybody else passing through, maybe for the first time, my suggestion has become more like the everydayers. And best way to do that is to subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Have your notifications on, of course, so when the content drops, you're all there to absorb it. And audio-wise, Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcast. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go, Browns.